So we have a great show today. My guest is comedian Pete Correale. Now, Pete's got a great career path, you know, from being a stand-up comedian to also being a writer. And he's written for Kevin James's last two sitcoms. He has one that was on Netflix, and then he had another one that was on CBS before that called Kevin Can Wait. And Pete has wrote on both of those shows as a staff writer. And he's an awesome stand-up comedian that's hilarious. You might listen to him. He's Sebastian Maniscalco's sidekick on their podcast that they do every week called the Pete and Sebastian Show. If you haven't checked that out, go check it out. It's one of the funniest podcasts. I listen to it. I'm a big fan of it, and I don't listen to a million podcasts. I listen to theirs, and I listen to Mark Maron's podcast. Those are my two go-tos in the podcast world. All right, so I'm really excited, and I want to get to the interview really fast because we did a pretty long interview here. So let's get right to it, okay? Here's Pete Correale. We'll be right back.
What's up, dude? I know you're close to New York City. So are you going to bring me fucking down? Because I can't. The New York City comics are like, they're acting like it's the end of the world, and I can't be around it.
No, I'm not nearly. I'm somewhere between you and let's think who's someone who's like knee deep in the New York comedy scene, like who would be somebody?
Lenny Marcus.
Lenny Marcus, or I was gonna say, why can't I think of his name? It's the comic who does a million late night spots, and he's doing really well right now. Mark Normand, like those guys. Like I'm in between you, because I'm like, I'm a 25-minute drive from the Upper West Side, and then to go down to the Village and the Comedy Cellar is like a 50-minute drive, and I just don't do it as much as I used to. I do it here and there, whereas that's why I'm saying I'm like in between you and them.
Well, I'm freaking 7.5 hours from New York City.
Yeah.
So I'm about 45 minutes to 50-minute drive, easy drive on the throughway, but easy peasy to Buffalo Helium. So I go there, man. It's great. I go there and I work out whenever I want. And it's funny because that place has it reminds me of the Comedy Cellar when I started at the Cellar, because when you go there during the week, and it's just local comics, it's not crowded at the Helium. You're playing for sometimes 10 people. But on the weekends, depending on the headliner, it starts to get more crowded. So it's like the Comedy Cellar towards the end got so packed that, every time you went down there, you had to do some of your regular stuff just because it was too crowded to just completely work out. You're looking at me weird. Are you hearing me?
Yeah, I'm just.
Oh. I feel like you're fucking trying to when someone's driving and they're also half listening to you and they're going, yeah. I'm like, all right, I'll listen. Get on the highway and then we'll pick this conversation back up.
I'm debating if I should plug my headphones directly into my computer. It's like a technical thing.
What kind of fucking host are you? I'm sitting here talking and you're wondering if you should plug headphones in. You're not even listening. Nobody listens anymore.
I am listening, and I hear you that there's so many comics that have left New York and LA, especially in the last year, that and as you get to be an older person, you start to figure out that a lot of this shit was in our heads, that we had to live in New York City or we had to live in LA and we had to just do spots in New York because it meant this. And now it's like wherever you move, you can figure out a way to be a comedian. You can either, you go to Buffalo, you go to Syracuse, whatever you got to do if you want to work on stuff. And I agree with you that if you go to the Cellar and you can't fuck around and try shit, and that's what us comedians you and I that have been doing it so long, that's what's most important to us, to have a place where we can start building that new hour of material.
Yeah. I will say though, you need those city clubs to learn how to do stand up. I mean, I don't see how a guy can start out in Kansas and fucking make it. By going to New York specifically, not only are you getting all the stage time, but you're seeing live the best. And when you see the best, it's like a ball player whose son becomes a pro ball player. It's because they knew from 2 years old how good you really do have to be. So, but when you reach a point where you're headlining and stuff, it started to be like, what am I getting out of this anymore? And even I would do new stuff, but you couldn't do all new stuff. You had to do something in between because other comics were crushing. So you had to do some of your regular stuff. But more than just that, it was the comics too. They just, if they're not famous, they get very depressed, and after a while, it's like, all comics love to say when they become famous, "Oh, I would have did this forever. I didn't expect to be famous. I just wanted to make a living doing comedy." Yeah, and then when they're just making a living doing comedy, they want to fucking shoot themselves because they're not famous. They're all, and I get it. I'm not saying like I'm perfect and I haven't had my moments where I get frustrated, but being around it, it was not creative, and I didn't need to be there anymore. And the big one that helped me though was when I finally did leave the city. I left years ago, man. I left years ago because I was headlining all the time, and I was barely even going to the Comedy Cellar or anywhere because I was always on the road. But I remember being like, I moved to LA at first, and I remember like looking on my phone every night to see who's playing the Cellar because I'm like, they're getting better than me. They're getting better, and I'm not. Um, and then one time I was doing a headlining gig. Me and Bobby Kelly were playing together at this casino, and Robert Kelly goes, "Dude, we played the Cellar for years to learn how to do stand-up because we didn't know how to fucking do it. Now we know how to do it. So you don't have to be there. You can go wherever you want and live and work out stuff." And then the big eye opening was I started doing gigs opening for Regan from time to time. Brian Regan and I became good friends. And the first time I worked with him, as obviously it's a theater and he's got this, all these fans, and it's sold out. And like he halfway through, he does like new bits and it doesn't even get a big laugh. And he goes, "All right, folks, that was a new one. Appreciate the feedback. I'll give it some work, And he would do that here and there. And then he comes off and I go, "Brian, you're doing new bits out of theater?" And he's like, "Well, where else am I going to do it?" And I'm like, "Good point." And he goes, "And I think they like that." And I go, "They loved it. I'm blown away. I thought whenever you're playing the theater, it's like stick to the script, no new shit. But it's just a bigger venue and a prettier venue, but it's still the same concept. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Who
yeah,
really showed me that skill? Yours, it sounds like, was Brian Regan. I opened for Dennis Miller once, and talking about taking what you just said to another level. Dennis Miller, I don't know if you've seen him in the last 10 years anywhere on TV do stand up or anything, but he has a podium on the stage, right? Because it kind of fits because he does a lot of political material. But what he does is he's got a notepad right on the podium. His joke, he doesn't go work out anywhere. He's to the level where he can just write the joke
yeah,
word for word on paper and read it. Literally read it, and you can't tell the difference. And I remember hearing him interviewed somewhere where he's like, I can write an hour of material, and then I just start performing that hour that was just literally from the page. Like, where I think maybe you're the same as me, where we have ideas, we go on stage, and then they have hits and misses in the bits, and we fix them again, and we put them back out again.
yeah, yeah.
To think you could just write it on a page and go do an hour of all stuff that you never said before. The only time I did that, I don't know if have you ever like, I wrote a like a one person stand up show. It's kind of inspired by what Colin Quinn was doing,
Yeah.
where he had like a theme to all of his stand up.
You dabble in everything, Joe.
Yeah. So, and I'm still doing it, but right before the first time I did it was literally like 2 weeks before Corona blew out all the gigs. So I had notes all over the whole stage. On every piece of equipment that was up there at this theater was notes with a number on it, like telling me which order. Like I knew it kinda, but
Yeah.
there was I literally 60% of it I had never done on stage before, and I'm in front of 700 people. And I was like,
Wow.
fuck it. And because what saved me is a lot of it was about the area. And I was in the area doing the show. So imagine if you wrote a whole
Yeah.
hour about living in your town,
Yeah. Yeah.
you can't go practice that somewhere else.
Yeah. 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 And then your town loves it. No, that's interesting. There's a couple things I want to say about all that because I've been writing newsletters now. I've done like, I don't know, 15, 16 of them. I put them out every couple of weeks. And they're just, whatever I want to write about. Like it's an article, whatever, and I try to make them really funny. And I put a lot of fucking time into them. And then a friend of mine was like, dude, you can just read these and we could make an album just you reading these. We can add some cool sound in the background. And I haven't done that, but I get the idea. But I mean, I do write a lot and then I bring it to the stage. But there, to your point, how many times you write something that you think is funny and then they don't, the crowd doesn't, and you can't figure out why they don't, and then you do some throwaway shit to fucking kill time, and they love it, and you love that? I said that to my buddy at the drive-thru when we were getting coffee. I thought that wasn't even funny, and you love that, but you hate. All right, so there is no matter what. But with Dennis Miller, this is a great story. When I used to do this radio show with Jim Brewer, Kevin Pollak was on one time, and we happened to be chatting about our specials. And we go to commercial, so we're not live. And Pollak goes, "Everyone's doing special." At the time, he goes, "Gosh, everybody's doing specials." And he goes, "I even went to see Dennis Miller. We're good friends, and we went to have lunch. And I had to meet him on the lot wherever he was working, one of those Hollywood lots. He had an office. And when I walked in, Dennis Miller, they waved me into his office. Miller was on his phone, and he just kind of points for me to sit down, have a seat right there, and I'll be 1 sec." And he goes, and I hear Dennis Miller saying something about a special. So when he gets off the phone, I go, "You're doing a special? I didn't hear about you working out or anything like that." Miller goes, "Yeah, I'm doing a special." And then he goes, where are you working out?" And Dennis Miller goes, "Where am I working out?" And he literally points at his desk. He goes, "Right here." And Pollak goes, "What do you mean right here?" And Dennis Miller goes, "I write the whole thing in my office. I pace around, I get the timing down, I memorize it." He goes, "And then maybe I'll bring it to like the Pittsburgh Improv for a night or two," because that's where he's from, Pittsburgh, I guess.
Right, yeah.
He goes, "But otherwise, I just lay it down, and then we do a show, we record it, and then I take it on the road, and that's it." And then yeah, I don't want to get too out of line here, what I'm saying, but he said that Dennis Miller said, "I don't need them to tell me what's funny. I know what's funny," meaning like, he's always been like that, right? His stand-up is, if you don't get it, that's your problem, not my problem. Whereas me and you are more like, okay, let me go home and reword this because obviously no one understands what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, I think it's if maybe the key is, I think you and I, and even Sebastian, who you do your weekly podcast with, we're probably similar in that way, that our life is our jokes, and there's got to be some living on stage, like you're saying things that you really feel and have or probably almost really happen to you, and then you turn them into bits. Whereas a Dennis Miller, or like even the guy I said earlier, like a Mark Norman, they write jokes and they're short and they're like ba 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 ba, and then it goes to the
Yeah.
next thing. Whereas like, I mean, as negative as everybody is about Bill Cosby, I always tell this story. I saw him live once, like 15 years ago, and what he did 2 hours without an opener, and literally just he at the show on the ticket said 8 o'clock. He walked out there at 8 o'clock on the dot. Everyone wasn't in their seats yet, and he just begins. I love the. I don't know if you can hear this in the back. My wife just like starts printing shit from another room, and it just starts flying on the floor in my room. The thing's not even out. Sitting there going, "What is her?" So Cosby. What if she's printing something that's 25 pages long right now?
I don't hear it, so you're good,
Okay,
man.
it's fucking so distracting to me. I'll show the camera if you can. I think there's a printer.
Oh yeah.
Shit. All right, whatever. It's still going. Can you hear that?
Not really, no.
It sounds like a train. All right. So Cosby, 2 hours, but what made it not seem long? Every bit was about one specific thing, and it was 20 minutes long, almost on the dot. like a little short movie. It had an opening, a
Yeah.
middle to it, and then like a conclusion that you give an applause to because you could tell the bit had this really funny end to the 20 minutes. And then boom, starts a new subject and draws it way out for 20 more minutes. No bit was like 2 jokes long and then on to the next story.
Right, right,
Everything
right.
was long.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but I mean, are you laughing though for
Yeah.
the
Oh,
whole
yeah. I
time?
mean, they're like. I remember working with Bill Hicks when I first started, and I'm sitting
Cool.
there with this comic, and like I was so enamored by Bill Hicks. I think I had my video camera out. Like that was my first road gig, and I'm just filming myself talking to Bill Hicks. Like I was way ahead of my time. That's shit you would do now, right?
Yeah, right.
And Bill Hicks I'm the MC. This other guy was the feature, and he looks at us, and he called his bits. He called them pieces. He goes, "I'm in the middle of my Chevette piece," and we were like, and the feature act goes, "Note to self: in 5 years, stop calling them bits and change them to pieces." But
I love it, man. I'm
I,
doing my piece about bread, right? Oh, I
right.
love that.
Yeah. So every comic, that's what you realize, I think, when you've been doing it long, is there's no rules. You can be a piece comic, you can be just a quick bit comic, you could be a Stephen Wright, you could be a Mitch Hedberg. There's really no rules. So it's
Yeah.
like do what you want. And I think Dennis Miller was correct as I know it's funny. And if you just go up there and tell it and you have that confidence behind it, it usually works when you've been doing it a long time like us.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like to do a little of all. I like writing jokes and doing setup punch, so I do a little some of that in my act, and then I like some longer stories. The only problem when I do a long story is when I'm starting out and I feel like they're not into it, and you're like, "Well, that's gonna be upsetting for everybody because this thing's 7 minutes and we just got started," you know. So, and then when you ever halfway through one and you bail on it, and it's only like 2 people yelling, "Keep going," and you're like, "Yeah, guy, that's exactly why I bailed on it." The fucking rest of the room, is silent. I got 2 people listening that are into it. So,
But
but
that's why they're laughing at us because we are willing to be honest and
yeah,
say
it's
and give
true.
them that little narration of this ain't work. Like there's a lot of comedians that might be detached and they're never going to show them that side. Have you ever worked with one of those guys that just fucking clicks? It's like he's click and play, and no matter how much they're laughing or not laughing, they do it the same way every time.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know. But I mean, the joke thing though too, it's all great, right? Because like then you take a guy like Gaffigan, and he just goes up there and rattles off jokes about one topic, and they're so funny. You get going, that one makes you laugh, and then you're like, oh, he's got another one, he's got another, and then the giggling kicks in. So you know, it's it's to each their own. Everybody's got a different way of doing it, but the important thing I think we both agree on though is you have to be you, whether you're going to tell one line jokes or a story. You have to be Joe Matarese, because to be anyone else, we've seen that. Remember when we started out, without naming names, some guys would do character comics, and you're like, guy, what are you going to do when you're 60? You're going to still do that shit? It's crazy.
Yeah, that's it's weird how that evolved and is pretty much gone. I guess if you do that style, there are some guys lingering around that do characters, but usually they get into sketch comedy and stuff like that. That
Doing my
or
show.
they just or they become a huge they become a huge like social media sensation with their characters, not really in a
One
stand up.
sec, Joe. I'm doing a show. I told you I was. I cannot do anything with your dad. Please tell him not today. Guy, we got the guys here. No, it's not a day. No, no, please. Holy cow.
I love it. It sounds like
Jack,
my
but he's in the way of Phil and Steve. It's a muddy mess. Sorry, bro.
it sounds like my life.
Gosh. Well, that's the thing. Comics are always casting now. Their wives and girlfriends walk in the room. They're like, I don't know if you're on the phone or if you're in the middle of a goddamn show of some sort. So,
Yeah, thank God my kids finally started back into school 5 days a week that I can do a podcast without my daughter she'll just open the door and walk in and say, I need you to make me some oatmeal or make me a bagel or I'm bored. Do you ever get that one from your daughter? I'm bored. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I
Life's
know.
boring.
Yeah, I'd kill to be bored. I would kill to be bored. I don't have time to be bored. All right, because even when I have nothing to do, I'm so stressed out. I can't be bored. Yeah.
So, so the podcast now is called Pretender to Contender, which all my podcasts, which I've had 900 of, and that's why I get ripped on the most. And I agree with the people that rip on me, by the way. Um, I have the only trolls that are 75% correct.
Oh, why? What are they? What are they?
Oh, that's what I get trolled about the most. That how many fucking podcasts I've had.
Oh, well,
But
what do you do? What changes about them? Like a bar, just the name?
the name will change. Sometimes there's a different guy who's my co-host. Sometimes it's just me. I've had. I explained that I was on Kevin Brennan's podcast last week, and I said to Brennan, I think I treat podcasting like I do stand-up, which is I got to throw a lot out and fix it up, and by the time you see it, it's been filmed and it's all honed. Whereas when you do a podcast and you're figuring it out, it's fucking out there, so they can rip on it. So like I'm like this like idea guy. Like I've had one with the shrink as my co-host, and we're doing a show called Stand Up Lie Down, and we're interviewing a comedian and we're playing his clips, and then we're psychoanalyzing him. I had that for like, then the fucking doctor ended up losing his license because of sexual harassment. We were about to sell that as a television show, and the whole
Oh,
fucking idea got taken away. Yeah, I've had
damn.
so, but most of them are usually just like Life of Joe, Fixing Joe. Like they've been like all these names, but the people that have stayed with me along my podcast are like, it's usually just you.
Yeah.
So like, but I realized I like talking to people in all fields, not just comedians, and I like figuring out how did they go from being somebody who was just thinking about becoming what they became and then becoming amazing at what they do, like going from the pretender to the contender. And then I interview from like restaurateurs to like comedians to writers to singer songwriters, any career. And you see the overlap, which the main thing that's the overlap is everybody at some point goes, you got to just fucking dive in. And we've how many people you meet on the road, they're like, I want to do stand up, and it's like you just got to show up, dude. You got to go to the open mic and start. So like
Yeah. Those ones are the ones that are so annoying, It's like, listen, I'm not going to talk you off the end of the diving board. When you hit the water and you come back out and then you want to talk about stand up, we can talk about it. But I'm not going to be that guy going, just go for it. That's such pansy ass shit. I can't stand when they do that.
yeah.
I
So
can't
like
stand. It's a different world now with these comics too, man. Emailing me, can I feature for you? What the fuck? You know how that evolves? That evolves when you're in the city, you're in a green room, and eventually a headliner turns around and goes, what are you doing March 12th and 13th? Right? And you go, nothing. And then he's like, you want to open? You're like, okay. And then you run home, you tell your wife, I'll fucking open it. You don't email me, Holy shit. Anyway.
yeah, you want to tell those new comics. Do you know how many comedians we have that are our friends? Like, why would we want to go hang out with the guy who we've never met before? Because we like his bits? Like, you want to
Yeah.
tell them it has nothing to do with me liking your bits. It has to do with me liking your hang.
Yeah, that's at least 75%. 25% is your act. I can't have you embarrass me and ruin my show before I get out there. But other than that, it's afterward. Yeah. People ask me, like, I've never been to the point where I need to bring my own opener or whatever. I'm doing this some small theaters and stuff, but still, even then, they go, "Do you have an opener?" And I go, "Nah, let's get somebody who you think or whatever, And they'll send me a couple of tapes, and I don't even watch them. I go, just whoever you think, because I do like when I perform. I like to see new guys and see their stuff, But more than anything, guys like that I know that bring openers, I go, so like. What do you got to wake up in the morning and you got to wonder what your opener's doing and they see if he wants to get breakfast together? Fuck that, man. After the show, you got to sit in the lobby going, so want to get a drink or you go to bed or that? I go, I don't want to think about anybody else, man. You know what I mean? So I
So
hate
you don't. So you never had the gig where you get lonely and depressed because there's this. Because do you ever have a gig? I've only had it. I don't do cruises anymore, but I've done a few back in the day.
I did a month run on one time. It was such an experience.
Yeah,
Holy
you
shit.
and I ran. We passed each other you were getting off the ship and I was getting on. Do you remember that? That
No,
happened once. I swear that was you. Maybe it was
no,
Russ Maneve. I think it
no, it
might have been
wasn't me,
Russ
dude, because
Maneve.
I only did it one time for a month-long run, and I didn't run into another comic.
But did you ever have one where you're sitting there and there's a 6-day run with no gigs and you're just sitting on the ship for 6 days waiting for your fucking show? And
Oh,
I
no,
get
that must have been
depressed in that
crazy.
situation.
Yeah,
And then I
that's got to
drink
be nuts.
heavily.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, the cruise ship I did was this new cruise ship, a Norwegian, but a new boat. And long story short, they were starting it up, and they asked me to do this for the first month run. But basically, it goes back and forth from Miami, makes 3 stops, comes back, and then a new bunch gets on, and it does this 4 times. Now, you know, I like to smoke my weed, and they instill the fear of God in you to bring weed, so I don't. So when it makes its first stop on some island with St. Thomas, I get off because I'm like, I need weed, you know? And then I got a hookup and I got weed, and I knew I'd be back to St. Thomas 3 more times because I was doing this right. So each island it stopped at the first time, I talked about this on the cast with Sebastian. I bought weed and I brought little sandwich bags. And then after I smoked my weed, I would bury it under a rock on the island. So the next week, when I got back to the island, I would go to my rock and dig it up. And I'm like, there's my weed. And I had weed buried on every island. Oh, it was fantastic.
that's a great idea.
I said I should start an app. So, like, if you don't finish your weed and another person's coming to town, you go, it's the rock by the bus stop. Lift up the rock. Oh, yeah. So it was so funny, man. And it gave me something to do, too. When the boat stopped, I got to get off and go dig up my pot.
Yeah, it gave you a hobby.
But our ship had a show just about every day except the crossover day, which is Saturday, where there was no show. And to your point, even one day without a show, you're literally like, what am I, just on a fucking cruise by myself? Am I literally on a cruise by myself? My life is ticking away. My wife and kids are home enjoying life, and I'm walking around a buffet. What the, you know? And it just, and then you see,
and you can't even call your wife or talk to your kids because it'll cost you $250.
yeah, yeah. And then you ever run into the other comic who like has been doing cruises for 20 years, and to him that's making it. He couldn't be happier, you know. He has friends on the islands when the fucking boat stops.
Right.
You know? Oh, I get my massage from Sally when we hit Port St. Fuck.
Oh. So I hate to even make you now. I almost hate to even ask you questions about when you were when the idea of wanting to do stand up was in your head. But just give them a little bit of Pete Correale when he was the Pretender, and he was like, at what age was it, and how did you
All right.
how did you get the Pretender out of your system?
Well,
And when did you stop feeling? And I'll give you 2 questions. That
okay.
and when did you stop feeling like I'm just a fucking pretender? Now I'm a comic now. What was the thing that happened that made you feel the next stage had begun?
Okay. Well, first of all, growing up, I loved stand up, you know, everything like every other guy, listened to everyone from Eddie Murphy to, I knew I really loved stand up when I was about 18. And I bought, specifically went to the store to buy Stephen Wright's I Have a Pony, the cassette, and put it in. My buddy had a Datsun, and we bought beer and we smoked pot, and we went to like this area where we could park, and we just listened to it like 2-3 times, you know. And so looking back, I knew like I really liked stand up. Then when I graduated, didn't think about it.
Go back, because that's kind of interesting that you had. Because I had that same friend. There was always like one guy out of all my friends would not want to listen to a stand-up album. Literally listen to it 3 times in a row. You had a
Yeah.
friend that would listen to a stand-up album with you?
Yeah, but growing up on Long Island, my buddies, they all kind of really like good comedy. You know, I mean, we literally got to the point I'll never forget. We loved the Dice so much that when Ford Fairlane the movie came out, we fucking tailgated. We bought tickets at the movie theater for a 7 o'clock show, and at 5 o'clock we brought a hibachi to the parking lot. We were drinking beers with the hibachi, hanging out, thinking the movie was going to be sold out, and that was so smart to get there so early. It was like half full. And I remember like halfway through the movie, we're all taking a piss in the bathroom. My one buddy Ronson goes, "You want to get the fuck out of here?" And we're all like, "Yeah." I'm like, we couldn't believe Dice wasn't making us laugh, but it was time to
Did you
accept that.
leave?
Yeah, we all left, man. This movie wasn't funny, you know? But yeah,
That's
so we
hilarious.
we all loved stand-up. But it was something I couldn't do. You know, my dad was an architect, my mom was a teacher. It was just something you admire from a distance. And then when I went to college, Fredonia State, upstate New York, my senior year, I took for just the credits, I took a class called Acting for Non-Majors. And that gave me the quote unquote acting bug. So when I graduated college, I told my mom I want to try and act. And I went, got the backstage, whatever you call it. And I found, I go on these casting calls, like big things where no one, with hundreds of people. And then I found an audition to try and be a part of an improv group. And it was just a bunch of misfits. And I auditioned, and of course, they let me be in it. And we'd practice, and then we would do shows. And we did 3 shows. And each show we did was at a comedy club at like 5 o'clock at night. We'd bring our own family, one of those things, we'd perform in front of 10 people. And then the last one was on the Upper West Side, Stand Up New York. And the whole improv group was going out to have a few drinks. And I turned to the club owner and I go, "Can I watch? Do you mind if I pay for my beers?" And he goes, "No, you can watch the show." And I sat in the back, and the first comic went up and my jaw dropped. And I was like, love at first sight. I'm like, holy shit, I want to do this. And then I went to Hamburger Harry's open mic, and I'm waiting online with all the other comics. I don't know anybody. And then I see Judah Friedlander and Jim Gaffigan, and they're talking about a bit. Like, Friedlander's like, "You're going to do that thing with the thing?" And Gaffigan's like, and I remember just sitting here going, "Oh my God, comics talk about the bits and they work it out. This is fucking so cool." And I just loved it.
Right. I think we've all, yeah. That feeling of going to that first open mic after you were living a life of listening to all these comedy albums. And I grew up in the house where my brother, I have a 9-year younger brother. I have a sister. She was like not involved in any of this shit. It was just me, my dad, and my brother. And it was just every fucking 2 days, it was, "Joe, get in here," or "Dad, get in here." And it was always when there was a comedian on the MTV half hour, or they were on the Tonight Show. And I would VHS record them all. Like I have VHS tapes like just filled with fucking stand up from before I was a comedian. And then that moment where you go to the open mic and you go, "Oh my God, this is where I'm meant to be." And
Yeah.
that feeling is
What about when you become a comic and then eventually you run into one of these guys? Like, I remember one time being at New York Comedy Club, the Dump, where I used to mop and sweep the floors. And Rich Voss comes in and he's doing a bit about, "I have 3 kids, 2 stepchildren," which is great to have stepkids because then you don't have to hit your own kids.
yeah.
And I hear the joke and I'm like, "Oh my God, I remember hearing that in my living room in college, dying laughing with all my buddies." And and I go up to him like, "My dude, it's you. Holy shit." And you just
Right.
can't believe you're like, you're dipping a toe in the world of these people.
And speaking of and people that are listening, if you're thinking about being a comedian, I mean, you don't know who's going to drop in. That's what's also cool. You know what it's similar to now that I think about it? I used to, I said this to my son before. I love going to baseball games because you never know. Like, there's something about baseball. It has like a romanticism about it. I'm like, you might see a fucking perfect game and you were there and you're going to talk about it for the rest of your life. Because I had that happen once with my brother where we were at the Yankee game when Dwight Gooden threw the no-hitter, and it was just like we still talk about it. I have a picture on my wall of when we went to that game together. And
Awesome.
that's kind of how comedy is, because you mentioned Stephen Wright before. I started in Philly, the open mics. More than once, Stephen Wright dropped in to do
Cool.
us like 10-minute set. And I still remember it because the MC goes, he doesn't even want me to give credits. I go, what does he want you to say? He goes, he just wants me to say, from Boston, Massachusetts, Stephen Wright, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was like, I was like, wow, that's a great fucking intro. It's nothing and it's great. Like, and then remember how he would open? There would be like a huge applause and he would go, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. My mom loved him too. He was great. Yeah.
Yeah, we went and saw. I had the friend who loved comedy too, who lived 2 doors down from me. That we would just listen to comedy, and we went and saw Stephen Wright in the round in Valley Forge when I probably because I'm older than you, so you're listening to him before you did stand up. I'm probably 1 or 2 years into being a comedian, and I go pay to see Stephen Wright at this big theater with that guy. But and
Yeah.
I remember my one last note about it. Back to you, is that I remember my buddy goes, he's doing all the same shit from his HBO special, and he's like, he was mad at the crowd. He goes, "Don't you guys have HBO?" He was like, "How do you
Yeah.
guys not know every joke?" And we're like, I was like, dude, they're not like us. They didn't study it.
Yeah. I know. It's such a thing. Gosh, it's so, you don't know, right? You don't know. You do what when you do stuff that you've done on a special, I'll tell you, the crowd will come off, and some of them, like if people will go, "Oh, I brought so and so, my friends, and I was hoping you'd do that bread bit. Great show, but we really wanted to see that bread bit." And you go, "Oh, sorry," and then you do the bread bit the next show, and then someone will come up to you and go, "Great show. I mean, some of the stuff we already saw, but it was great to hear it again. It was great to hear it again." And they're pissed because you didn't do new stuff, so you can't fucking appease everybody. It's
No,
insane. I gotta
that's
stop cursing.
why I loved Brian Regan and the way he goes back out as his encore and lets them request old bits. I think it's a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
way to do it.
yeah. It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So when do you? So when does the next phase come in? Because you have a lot of phases, and I want to get to all of them in this interview. Where from writing and radio and podcasting, you have a lot of what do they call them? Irons in the fire going. So
Yeah, well, I guess it's funny because you know this too. When you do a Letterman, or like the first one I did was the Tonight Show, you know, people don't realize, maybe, or they don't care, but you could do those shows and still not be really making a living as a comedian. You're up there going, "Hey, Baba Bob," and meanwhile you're getting off stage for the Tonight Show, calling your book or going, "Anything? I mean, what the fuck?" So, and then even my first hour special was exciting and fun. But at least for me, it's like sometimes it's not the like accomplishments that make you really feel like you're in it. Like my hero is Dave Attell, and I know you would think the world of him too. And anyone who might not know, as far as what New York comics, this guy, like, I can't tell you how much we all learned from watching this guy. Just the best.
yeah,
So
he was so good that there were so many comedians that were accidentally sounding like Attell at one time. There's not many comedians that were like affecting the way everybody sounded. I'm like,
yeah,
you're doing it
yeah,
well,
it's funny.
dude.
We all go through phases, right? When we're
Yeah.
starting out, like mine was a Voss phase. I would do Voss a lot because he's just so underrated to me. As far as I know, people think he's great, but he's great.
Oh,
But anyway,
Rich Voss.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
unbelievable. Yeah, I just worked with him, and he did the nicest thing, which was it was so classic. During Corona, this one club in Connecticut opened up. It was and Voss was going to be there, and I didn't care. I just wanted to do stage time, and I contacted Vinny Brand, and I was like, "Dude, I'll open, I'll feature. I'm just looking to get up. I want to work on some stuff. I've been sitting in my house." So I get there, and Voss is the headliner. We're hanging out in the green room, and this girl comes into the green room. "What do you want me to say about you?" And I tell her, and I hang in the green room the whole time because Voss is so fun to hang with. He's got me laughing in the green room. So I literally get introduced and just walk from the green room right into the comedy club, right? So I'm just right on stage, and I do my whole set, right? And then the next night, I'm driving to the gig, and Voss calls, and I'm like, "What's up?" And I'm thinking I'm in trouble or something when the other comedian calls you on the way to the gig. I'm like, "What?
yeah,
What?"
yeah.
He's like, "I called the club and I told them they should get an MC. You're too good to be MCing." I go, "What do you mean MCing? I featured yesterday." And he goes, "No, you didn't." you MC'd. I go, I did? That girl came in the green room and asked me my credits. I thought she was the MC. He goes, no, she just introduced you from the back of the room. You went up cold. I didn't even fucking know. I went right into my act. and I thought it was so nice that he goes, I told them that you need an MC tonight.
Yeah,
Makes
yeah.
the show better. I go, dude,
That's
thanks.
great.
Not many guys would do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know they would just go, wow, great to have Matarese and opening this thing, man.
I thought it was just then it would have been a 2-man show, and he didn't want that. He said there should be an MC before you.
Right.
So
No,
funny
that's
that I didn't
cool.
know.
That's cool. That is cool. But you know, I was gonna say, as far as like, you know, when you say Contender, I don't know about Contender, but just kind of knowing you like kind of, I guess, made it a bit.
How about you? Well, sorry, I was going to say, I
Yeah.
think, wouldn't you agree that you become a contender when we go back to saying what you said earlier, which is be yourself? When you start, when do you start really being you on stage? Do you think from the beginning you were you, or you were figuring it out, and then something happened where you're like, oh, this is, I can just be me. I don't have to be somebody else.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was always trying to be me, so that wasn't the problem as far as, you know, like, but I was different versions of me, you know, man. At first I'd go up and I would smoke cigarettes. I'd smoke so much on stage, sometimes people would go, another one? And I'd be like trying to be the mean guy and you know, the Dennis Leary, who I love too, ranting. And then I'd go up and I'd try to pontificate like Chappelle, you know, and just trying to find my own way, you know. But it's, for me at least, I was just constantly trying to get to a point on stage where I'm the same kind of guy I am at a party when I'm making everybody laugh and in my comfort zone, you know.
Right.
So again, I can't remember when I exactly got there, but I remember Robert Kelly, again, just adore that guy, giving me a real nice compliment once on a radio show saying, when we played the Cellar, there was, we broke in together, you know. So he would close these shows out at the Cellar and crush, and I would usually host. That's how we started out there. And then, you know, eventually, you know, I stopped hosting, and but I would you know, also not always host, but I would talk about my life and my relationship with my wife or my girlfriend before she was my wife. And I do, and Robert Kelly would go, he goes, and you do good. You did really good, man. You had good stuff. And he goes, but then I'd go up and I would crush. You got to admit. And I go, dude, you would fucking destroy the room. And he goes, but you were like talking more about your life. And I was doing kind of dirtier stuff. And he goes, and then as time went by, you got more comfortable at talking about that stuff that you were trying to talk about. You got better. And he goes, and I got better too, but I was still talking about this stuff that like I wasn't interested in talking about anymore. And he goes, so I would go home and tell, when I got married, I tell my wife, I want to be talking more about like what Pete's talking about and do that. And I go, that's so funny, because I go home to my wife and go, this guy fucking crushes, man, you know?
Right.
But he's like, so I almost had to, he goes, I almost had to regroup and go back and take the hit a little bit to try and learn to talk about my life the way you were. Whereas you were already doing that from the start. And I was like, oh, I appreciate you noticing that, man. I really do. Because early on, I felt like maybe I could have been doing other stuff that would have crushed more, but like it just wasn't going to serve a purpose for me, you know? I'm not saying I could have crushed like Bob. I mean, Bobby, you fucking bring the roof down.
Yeah. He's always been like that.
Yeah.
And even more so now.
Yeah. With stuff that he's now proud of talking about, I guess, you know, as far as, not I guess, like it is great. I'm just saying as far as
talking about himself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But for me, at the end of the day, I just want to say, hanging out with Attell, you know, beginning, he'd be like, you know, give you some tips here and there or telling me I have to headline. And then reaching that point when I was headlining all the time and I'd come home and I'd be at the Cellar and I'd be having a smoke with him outside, literally just talking like two comics and two friends. Again, I don't talk to him at all. I don't call him or anything, but just in that moment and that kind of stuff, and you're like, I fucking made it, man.
Yeah, that is true. When you're not even talking to the guy that you idolized as somebody that's at this higher level. You're just talking to him as another comedian.
Yeah, he's bringing up venues and you know him because you played him, you know. And he's like, you know, the da da da. And you're like, yeah, the guy over there, you know. And you're just like, I'm in it, baby. I'm in it. I've been everywhere, man. So anyway,
then the whole radio thing comes in for you, and I guess this is before podcasting, because you start doing the radio show with Jim Brewer
Yeah.
Probably mostly had. Did you mostly have stand-up comedian guests or all kind of people?
I'd say all kind of people because in Sirius, what was so cool and still is there, it's like there's so many studios, as you know. So there's so many different shows with so many different guests. So sometimes you can pawn guests off of another show, or like you'll have somebody go out and go, they got an astrologer on the Cosmopolitan channel. The guy's got free time, and you're like, bring in the astrologer, you know. So you get a lot of that kind of shit going on.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
But
Yeah,
then you get stuff like everybody tries to pawn everybody's guest, you know. So like Brewer and James Hetfield from the lead singer of Metallica, they're very good friends. So he would come on, and when he would come on, he would be like, you know, dude, don't make sure they don't bug me to go on other channels, you know. So and other shows would do that too, you know, like they would have people on and they'd be like, don't have people from other shows wait outside the doorway. So when our guest leaves, they try to drag him on some other show and he feels bad or she feels bad and goes on it when she really wants to go home. You know, so
right. So how does that show evolve and how does that start? What happens? You and him
oh,
friends first,
what's that?
obviously.
Brewer calls me up one day and says we're really good friends, you know, and says you want to go do a show for Sirius once a week, once a month for 3 hours. We're going to do a show, or maybe once every 2 weeks. And they'll give us like a couple $100 for it, and we'll see if we like it. I said, all right. We literally did one. We did one, and we had so many laughs and so fun. He calls me up the next day after it, and he goes, "So, talk to Sirius, and they want to know if I want to do a show with you, you co-hosting. You'd be my guy, but it's the Brewer Show." That's not him saying it. I'm telling you, that's just what it was, the Brewer Show. And he goes, and they want to know if we want to do it uh, every 4 days a week for a year on Monday through Thursday. And I'm like, holy shit, yeah, I'd do that. And then like a couple of months into doing that, they're like, you want to go every day and do a 3-year contract? And I was like, fucking, hey, this is awesome. And then we did it and we had so much fun, but it was kind of frustrating back then because it wasn't even Sirius XM and Stern wasn't even on yet.
Right.
So, you know, for me, it was great. For Brewer, it was more like, you know, comics were coming in. And then it started to be this way for me after a while, too. Comics were coming in to promote a special or this they're doing or that they're doing. And after a while, you're just sitting there and the grass is greener on the other side. You know, you're like, all right, we're entertaining truckers right now. That's who had Sirius at first, a bunch of truckers. And Joe Schmo's coming in. He's doing a special. What the fuck? You know, so then you start chomping at the bit.
Was this must have been before you could have like one of those ISDN lines in your hotel room where you could do the show from your comedy gigs. You probably couldn't do comedy gigs if you're on the radio 5 days a week.
Yeah, you're real. I mean, but for me, it wasn't the end of the world because I was getting paid well to do the radio and I could
Right.
just play all the city clubs. But
Right.
Brew, you know, he makes a lot of money on the road. Plus, he's like, where's this going? Where's this going? You know? And then, you know, Stern came on and got a little bit better, but still, you know, Jim was also started doing it from home, which was fine. But then after a while, you just he wanted to do some other stuff. And then, you know, which I get, but then I wanted to do it by myself and they wouldn't let me. Fuckers.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
The other
Said they
the
would
other thing
and
I
they
wanted to
didn't.
ask you about because you probably don't even know because I don't think it aired, but maybe we had the same manager. But you did a pilot with Jim Brewer for like what was it for? It was either ABC, NBC, or CBS, one of those, right?
Fox. Yeah, a long
Fox,
time ago.
Fox, or Fox. Okay, I remember. Was so that was before the radio show, obviously, right?
Oh yeah, way before, yeah.
Yeah, because I saw the pilot, and I don't think I ever told you this, but I was like, it's funny that now that I know you had a little bit of the acting chops in college because I thought you shined in the pilot. I was like, fucking, as comedians, we can always tell which comedians can do the acting and which ones can't. And I was like, fucking Correale. And talk about knowing who you are. You were being you, and that's what stood out to me. I was like, he's being him. He doesn't look like he's pushing, and it's still funny. Like,
Oh, thanks, man.
yeah,
Well,
were
Brewer
really good
definitely
in it.
wanted me
Yeah.
to get that, so he wrote it to be me, so which I appreciated.
Oh,
Yeah.
so that made it even easier. You didn't have to be like some overly Italian guy like that we auditioned for.
Yeah, and Brewer said, he goes, dude, you might have a problem because another comic came on and knows it was written for you, and they're doing you, and they're doing you. He goes, and they're doing you good. So you gotta. He
Really?
goes, we gotta. I was auditioning on Monday, so over the weekend we practiced with the casting director like crazy because they all wanted me to get the part because I was Jim's friend and they liked me, So, but
I
it's
want to know
funny how
so
the.
bad. Who was doing you? Do you know who it was?
No, I don't remember.
Was he a
Yeah.
comic or just an actor?
He was a comic. I do remember, but I'm not saying.
Oh, because I
Yeah.
know a few comedians that imitate you and they do it well. I'm trying to remember who it is.
But the
What's
guy
his
who
name, though?
directed that, you know how they always say it's so funny when they say like when you do something that doesn't go, if it doesn't happen, a project, and they go, you made another relationship, and you're like, yeah, what the hell is that word, really? At the end of the day. So when one time Kevin James, who I never met, asked me, he got a hold of me and said he's got the new show, Kevin Can Wait. And he goes, I have a lot of writers in here, but I could use another comic, man. Would you be interested? And I was fucking, psyched. I love Kevin. He's so awesome.
Yeah, that was going to be the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is how did that come about? Because he's another one that can nail the acting in a sitcom.
Oh,
Like
dude, he's the
nobody,
best.
Kevin James.
And I'm not just saying this because I wrote for the guy. He's the best sitcom actor that has ever lived because he can
Yeah,
do it
he's
all. He
unbelievable
can
at
do
it.
it all.
There's
Physical,
not many guys that can go over
romantic,
the top,
funny.
and you don't think it's like them trying too hard.
No. And you know what he was amazing? What he's unbelievable at is like the night before we would film a live show, I would, in my hotel room or my apartment, whatever, I would grab a 6-pack of beer and I would go through the script and I would pick like 4 or 5 jokes that I knew weren't going to work. Because I'm not the showrunner, so I don't get to decide what's in, but I'm like, that's not going to work. And when it doesn't work, Kevin wants something else. So I would just zone in on those all night and just like all night, spend hours just trying to get the perfect joke for those ones. And then when that would happen, he'd go, anyone got a joke? And Pete, what do you got? And I'd give it. And a couple of times early on, especially, the joke I gave got such a big applause that they stopped the scene. They stopped the scene. So by like the third week, I was like one of the few people that was always allowed to be out there to pitch new jokes. And you get really into that. It's really exciting. But sometimes the joke I would go to pitch Kevin would be like in the middle of the scene. And he would look at it and I go, and this is live in between takes. The whole audience is waiting. I go, if you say this, maybe, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, okay. And he goes, okay. And then he'd go back to the scene. And he'd have like 10, 12 lines before my joke even comes up. And I'm like, there's no way he's going to remember the line. He just looked at it for 2 seconds. I barely remember the line and I wrote it, Boom. He would never miss it. Just nail it. Huge laugh. And you're like, how? I don't know how this guy memorizes that stuff so fast and just
Well, you're
internalizes
forgetting.
it.
I mean, look how long King of Queens was on the air, and look how good it was.
Yeah, but the
So
other actors can't do that,
that
man. I mean,
skill of
it's like,
having it, that would be like being surprised that Ted Danson nailed it. Like of
yeah,
course he's
yeah,
gonna
I
nail it.
suppose. And
You're
then
talking.
Kevin could take nothing. You have no jokes for him at all. And he'll go, I got it. And then he'd just go up and just like do something funny, man. You're like, this guy's like worth every penny, man.
Who gave you the? Was that your idea completely to try to find the things that that might not work and come up with good ones that will work? So you're overly prepared for the shoot day. Did someone?
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. No,
Did
well,
someone tell you to do that?
yes, this guy who writes for Kevin all the time named Rock Rubin, who's
I
just
know Rock. Okay.
yeah, he's such a great writer and such a nice man. But which I learned early on when you're pitching a sitcom, is like you're in a writer's room with all these people. Kevin's not there. The stars usually aren't there, but you pitch a joke, it gets a huge laugh, and then the showrunner explains why or says no, he's not using your joke, and you're like, all right, fine. You can't get upset about it. It makes no sense. But Rock taught me, he's like, listen, when you got some really good ones, because once you say it, if they don't use it, you can't go to Kevin or the star of whatever show and go, I had this really funny joke. The showrunner said no, but I just wanted to run it by you. That's mutiny on the bounty. You can't do that. That would just make chaos. You'd be
Right.
disliked by the writers.
Yeah, it's
So
a
the minute you
competitive
say it,
atmosphere, right? I'm guessing. Super competitive atmosphere.
yeah, I don't think anything like
Everybody's
Saturday Night Live, but I not as competitive. Not it's. I mean, everybody wants to get the best joke in and that kind of thing, but it's just odd sometimes what the showrunner does and doesn't use. But you got to bite your tongue because once you pitch it, you can't repitch it. So Rock taught me. He's like, listen, you got a really good joke. Don't pitch it on a Monday because even if they use your joke, you're doing you're having table reads and rehearsals. By Thursday, the joke might not be funny to anybody anymore because they heard it 100 times and they freak out and think it's not a funny joke. Let's take it out. And you're sitting there going, it is funny. You just heard it 20 times,
right.
So he goes, you might want to save your best ones for the day of the shoot. And then if we need a joke on the spot, you got it. And I was like, ooh, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. And I took him up on that and it
You
worked
must
out
get
well.
upset.
It
You
came
must
my,
get
came my
upset.
niche.
Has it ever happened at the shoot where you got a good one and you give it to him, it gets a big applause, and then it still doesn't make the edit? You're like, what the fuck? They didn't even. Do you not find
Oh,
out that it's going to make the edit until?
oh, well, not yeah, that you really don't think much about. But the editing room is right next to us, so you can hear them when they're cutting it together. But if anything, trust me, anything that gets a laugh stays in a script. I mean, stays in the end. That's for sure. And
Right.
again, and by the way, Rock's the kind of guy you do a new joke and get a big laugh, and he'd look over at you and like give you the like way to go. So
Yeah.
he was cool, man. But it was interesting doing that.
That's cool. It's funny because I know Rock from he's another one of those guys. I think we played softball with him because we used to all play softball. I feel like Rock used to play somewhere where I played. Maybe it was in L.A. I don't know. But
Wow.
sometimes those are the guys you want to in sports too that realize this shit's a team sport. Like if you can get a good sitcom needs to be everybody working together to make this end product, and when it's fucking good we all should enjoy that we made a good show. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So that's what I used to say about stand-ups where we run into problems sometimes because it's such a by yourself business. I'm like, if we collaborated a little bit, we could have fucking hit television shows out the ass.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that because it is kind of funny how like with these showrunners, I feel like one thing I've learned is that it's just as important to recognize somebody else if something's funny to like be big enough to use it because if you have a hit show, no showrunner in the history of TV ever got fired for having a hit show. Like, you know what I mean? They're
Right.
not going to go, this show's a hit, but we're hearing that Kevin, or Timmy, the writer Timmy, is really coming up with the funny stuff. So you're fired as the show. No, they're going to keep shit the way it is. Everyone.
Right.
So, but anyway, I just wanted to say, as far as how that came together, when Kevin asked me to do it, he's like, Rock called me, Rock Rubin. He's like, yeah, we just got to let CBS know. And it might be like a 2-week vetting process. Who knows with them? As far as, but we really want you. We wanted to offer you the job first, and we'll give you a call. They call me back literally that day and say, yeah, CBS said no problem. We love Pete. That's great. And the reason I bring it up is because then my buddy, this comedian Mike Loftus, more of a writer, but
I
he's
know him too.
he writes he was already a part of the show. Me and him did a tour together, a Jameson whiskey tour, and he goes, dude, you know how you have things that happen and they don't work out, but you make relationships? I said, yeah. He goes, it's like we're all in the writer's room, and Kevin says, I'm thinking about Pete Correale. What does everybody think? And he goes, because Kevin was a fan of your stand-up and a fan of the podcast. He goes, I love Pete. We're really good friends. I did a tour with him. We talk all the time. The showrunner, a guy named Bruce Helford, he goes, we tried to do a show together, me and him, years ago. It was one of the things that didn't happen. I hoped it would. And he goes, I love Pete. I tried to do a show with him. I'd love to have him on the staff, right? Then they get a hold of CBS, and the main lady, I forget her name at the time, but she goes, we just bought a show he wrote last year. We love Pete. Of course he can write on your show. So all these things that didn't work out, now when you want this thing, you do. It really happens. Those relationships all do come together. And then this past year, I wrote on Kevin's Netflix show, a NASCAR show he did called The Crew.
That, yeah.
And again, he wants me to write on it, but he's like, we just got to run it by the showrunner. And the showrunner is the guy who was the freaking showrunner for the Jim Brew pilot that I acted on. And he goes, I love Pete. I hired him once to be an actor. Now I'm going to hire him to be a writer. Let's do it.
That's
So
why everybody's all over these new apps that just keep popping up for our phones, like the one I had mentioned to you, Clubhouse. It's literally a way to network like crazy if you really wanted to, because all of a sudden you're on the phone with like Bruce Elford's there, and you could be talking to him. It's like all
yeah,
these group chats, audio only, and that's true. It's that relationship. I mean, you doing the podcast right now is because we did comedy together, or what was I gonna say? Were you? Like I just during Corona, I was like, I realized that actors didn't have to go into Manhattan every day to do the auditions, that everything was virtual. And a friend of mine's a pretty popular voiceover actor, and he goes, not only do you not have to go into New York City for the auditions anymore, he goes, you get the job, you record it at your house on your computer. You have to just put this thing called Source Connect on your computer, and you pay a $30 a month membership. I go, I don't even have to get on a train to go audition or do the job.
yeah.
So he goes, yeah, I'll recommend you to my agent. She used to
Wow.
represent me like 25 years ago. She's like, yeah, I know Joe Matarese. So it was like, yeah. And then she just started sending me out on auditions again. And I was like, yeah, when you're in it this long, you start to realize also when you've been doing it a long time, these relationships don't even have to be in comedy to help your comedy career. Like you could know some rich dude who wants to invest in a movie project that you might want to write. Like it's just everything's about relationships. That's why I hate when my son's on his computer and he's not out. He just told me he didn't want to play on his 8th grade baseball team. He didn't want to try out because he already plays on a travel team. I'm like, do you know how you're cutting yourself here? You're like, you know how many guys you're going to meet by being on the team, then they practice 5 days a week. You're going to wish you did that when you're older. No, I won't. I'm like
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, every
I know.
relationship is important in life.
You know, not only can you audition from home, but when we were doing the first TV show for Kevin Can Wait on CBS,
Uh-huh.
when people were auditioning, they would usually be through the casting director in the studio, the casting place. But once in a while, you'd get one like we had a woman audition, an older woman, and she made this was obviously pre-pandemic, and she made the video at home. She didn't go into whatever casting place they're at, and they passed it on to us. And when we're first watching it, we're going, "Oh, look, she's in the hallway of the house. Look at the family photos in the background." It was like, and I think she lived in Chicago or something. And then her audition was good, real good. And then it kind of came down to her and another woman. And I never usually sit in on the casting. You can if you want when they show the videos in the writers' room.
Uh-huh.
And once in a while, maybe the showrunner will ask, "What do you guys think?" But with this one, they're like, "What does everyone think?" And we all rooted for her because you could tell her husband did the video, and we're like, "She'd be so excited. She'd probably be jumping up and down." I go, "Kev, she'll be jumping up and down right there in that kitchen, right where she is now. We got it." And we're like, "Let's give it to her. Let's make her life." And sure as shit, she came on set. She was so excited. And so where she did it actually helped her land it. If she was just at the casting office, we wouldn't have picked her. But it was just so endearing seeing her
Yeah, as
family
I'm not an
portraits.
acting teacher, but I remember an acting teacher saying it was all about humanizing it. And
Oh shit, yeah, that's
stand
true.
up is about humanizing it too. It's like that's why they like your stand up. It seems so human. You seem just like a regular dude, and you're being you.
Isn't
So
that interesting, Joe? When we see these guys that like, and I know you're like me in this mentality, certain comics that do stand up, they eat, breathe, live it. I mean, I've had comics without naming names say to me, "I'm not never getting married. I'm married to stand up." And in my head, I'm like, "That's fucking bizarre," but okay. And like, I'm also like, "Do you think that's gonna make you better than me? Your sole focus is stand up all the time." And then as time goes on, these guys go on stage and all they can talk about is current events or joke, joke, joke. They have no life experiences because they literally wake up, write, go, perform, go back. And
yeah, I know a
that's
comedian
not
who
human. And it
starts it.
becomes like you said, you're not humanizing it
You're
all up
not
there.
living.
Yeah.
I had a comedian that he would ask me advice sometimes, but he would never take it. And I remember getting to know him, and he told me once that he hadn't taken a night off of doing stand up in 9 years.
Wow.
Because if I don't have a spot, I go find somewhere to do stand-up. It could, if it's a shitty open mic at a laundromat, I do it. I go, you're not living, dude. You got to live. You can't do stand-up. You need to. It's like a marriage, right? You gotta not see your wife for 2 days to be excited to see your wife again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
You need that.
I guess it depends on what kind of stand-up you're doing. I mean, if you're just reading the newspaper and doing jokes about that, then maybe you feel one night off and my machine starts the weekend. I don't know.
That
That
was
is
what was
crazy.
wong with his act, though, when I would watch
But
it.
dude, you ever do
There
this?
was no
I do
living.
that like I'd go on like a week vacation back when I was younger, back when like me, I should be doing spots. People are getting better than me, and that kind of part of my career and my life.
Right.
But you'd be on some vacation with your wife or girlfriend, and I'd go like, well, you gotta live. I mean, if I don't do this, I have nothing to talk about on stage. I'm trying to justify my vacation. Meanwhile, I go back on stage after my vacation, and I don't have a single bit about the fucking vacation. Oh God, we drive ourselves nuts. Why didn't we just be accountants, bro?
True. Dude. Well, I'm gonna let you. This, I guess, is a good segue to end it. Let you go back to your life, because I saw, in the middle of the interview, your father-in-law and some mud. Something's going on.
Yeah. It's good to see you, man. It's good to see you. I remember once when we were doing a Montreal festival, and me, you, and another comic were having some drinks outside, and you're so honest. That's what I've always loved about you. You're going. At one point, we're all talking, and you go to me something like, "You're just cracking jokes right now. Aren't you nervous?" I'm totally freaking out right now. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot going. Yeah, and I mean, I felt that too. But you say it right out loud. You're like, "This is what?" Yeah, you know how you always get worked up.
Dude, when we were at Montreal that first year, I don't know. I don't think we were in New Faces together.
No, maybe, I don't know, but maybe we were doing different shows, but new faces, both of us at the same time.
I remember when you did New Faces at Montreal. It's just everybody. It's like the biggest festival for comedians, especially when we were coming back. I mean, every network was there, every agent, just huge.
Yeah.
And that New Faces thing, you didn't even stay in that main hotel that everybody else was staying in. They put you up across the street from it. And I remember my manager at the time coming to where I was staying, and I'm like, I didn't even know what to wear to go eat breakfast. I was like, what the And I look back at that and go, no wonder you didn't fucking make it. Back then, especially. No wonder you were fucking questioning the shirt, that the collar wasn't right to go eat breakfast. Like they were gonna come up, like I was gonna have a Matt Dillon story, which I used to hear he got discovered in an elevator or something. Like that was gonna happen. Who are you? What's that shirt?
You did make it, by the way, guy. Don't ever forget that, and don't kid yourself. You made it.
I made it. You're right.
Yeah.
No. I meant no wonder why I didn't do that well at that New Faces round.
Oh,
I did
God.
better years later when I came back to Montreal as the Masters. That's when that was my contender, when I started to go, just be yourself, and like what you said, say the shit that you don't think. Like where you said earlier, where you say something out loud that you didn't even mean to be a bit, and that's what gets the biggest laugh.
Yeah, the thing I said to my buddy. Come on, yeah.
Yeah, I had the weirdest gig last Saturday. Some guy I knew from 20 years ago was turning 40, and he goes, "Can you make a video of just like jokes, like a 10-minute video?" And I go, "That would be really weird, dude." I go, "But I got this new program where I can take some of my bits that are pre-recorded from my specials. I'll put ones that are about getting older, and then I'll talk in between them like I do on a podcast real quick, and I'll make it 10 minutes long, and I'll send it to you." He's like, "That's a great idea. Do it." And he calls me the next day. He goes, "You know what got the biggest laugh?" I go, "What?" He goes, "Not even your stand-up." He goes, "In the middle of the videos, you said something like how people... Oh, I said something about how your nose gets bigger when you get older. I just ad-libbed that, and I go, people come up to me and ask me if I boxed. And I go, yeah. Like, how's that not hurtful? Did you ever box? I go, no. I'm fucking Italian. What do you want me to do, dude? I fucking box. He goes, that got a huge laugh. I go, it did? I never said that anywhere.
Oh, that's great. That's so funny, man.
Yeah.
That's a great one. Shit.
Oh, dude.
Oh God, don't have a box. Good hanging with you, brother.
You too, man. I want to see you on a sitcom because
Man, we'll see someday,
tell
maybe.
Kevin to cut you into an episode. Every time you give him a great line that gets an applause, you get a scene.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So is the show on Netflix? Did it get picked up for a second season? Or are you
No, that
waiting?
one didn't. That one didn't. Yeah.
Is he doing another one?
No, that's it. That's it.
Okay.
The last, yeah, but the one we did on CBS, he did have me on. He was big back then, and which I love too, is the tag on the sitcom when you come back for 1 second for like one short scene. He
Hmm.
really likes that. So it was a Thursday night. We're writing one in his office, just like me, him, and three other writers, and we really got to laughing. Long story short, it was like another couple at his house, and the guy was Larry the Fish Guy, and we're all laughing. And Kevin goes, "And Petey, you're doing this tomorrow. You're Larry the Fish Guy." And I'm like, "Holy shit, I'm so excited!" And there's some lines. So
Hmm.
the next day, we're gonna pre-tape it without a live studio audience, and we do it, and it gets a lot of laughs with the people just in the camera crew and stuff. And they come up to me, they go, "We're adding it tonight. You're doing it live," because everyone loved it so much. And then we did it live, and it was so fun, and it killed again. But the woman playing my wife, very attractive woman, and she's really nice. And at one point in the scene, she like puts a hand on my knee, totally like an actress would because she's playing your wife. And I remember when she put her hand on my knee, in my head, I'm going, wow, this actress is really good, man. And wonder where they, found her. I mean, she's so realistic. She's bringing me into it more. And then I didn't even know till we're done with the rehearsal. It was Kevin's wife. She's an actress. She's awesome. Steph. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, Kev, your wife's awesome. So yeah, I have one scene ever in the whole 2 year
It
run,
was his real
and
wife.
his real wife plays my wife in the scene, and it got a big laugh. It was a lot of fun, man.
Oh
He's
wow.
he's just a great dude,
So
man. He's
where
just
is this?
such a great
Is
dude.
that episode on on Netflix? I could see
No,
it.
no, no. I was on the CBS show. It was
Oh,
on
that was on. I
CBS.
gotta see
Yeah.
that. You got that online somewhere?
No, I don't think so. Sometimes I post. I
So
posted it once.
here's. Well, I'll end with this last question because it's something I'm curious about because it's like all of us stand-up comedians that have the dream. My dream, I would say, is more having my own sitcom than being a successful stand-up comedian. I've always wanted to know what that felt like, to be on stage, studio audience, doing a sitcom, and now you've done it. You did that whole pilot, and you did this scene. You've got to feel that. Like I've always felt like that probably wouldn't be that hard to do because the audience is there, and it would really excite a stand-up comedian, and I bet we would shine. Am I correct, or is it
Yeah.
something you go, fuck, you
No,
can miss?
yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. You shine, but sometimes we would have comics on, and they would be a little nervous, and they wouldn't shine. But they would in 2 weeks. They're just nervous because it's like they've
The
never done
first
any of
one.
this. Yeah, like everything's deer in the headlights. But when I was writing on the show, I was there every day. I mean, I could go walk out on the set by myself. I mean, sometimes I would bring my pad out and hang out on the set bar, just to. So when you're around it like that crazy amount, and you're watching the rehearsals, nothing makes you nervous anymore because you know the network people, you know it all. You said so.
Hmm.
Then by the time I did the scene, I was like, I should probably crush this fucking scene because I'm not nervous about any of this.
Right.
And so to your point, yeah, once you get past those initial nerves of all of it being new for a comic, yes, there is no you'd be a fool to not do it in front of a live studio audience if you could, because when you get that first laugh, oh, the blood starts warming up. You don't even want the other actor. You're like, get that fucking person out of here. Let me do a monologue right now. I'm loving this shit. And they
How
love
about
you, and then the scene ends, and then while they're setting up the next scene, you're still fucking doing stand up to the crowd. Then at the end, Kev brings the whole cast out, and they're all hugging. It's fucking great, great
how
stuff.
about how about when you did the pilot with Brewer? Because that's a whole episode you were in. that was that you had to only have been in front of the studio audience the day of the taping, so you don't get time to master it. It was one day, right? It wasn't a 2 day
Yeah.
shoot.
Yeah, for that too. Shit, I
Were you
remember.
noticing scene by scene you were getting more comfortable that day? You're like, all right, I feel better.
Yeah, I was. It was, but I was also I was only like doing stand up like 3 years. So, you know, you also naive enough to think it's like when a rookie makes it to the Super Bowl and he thinks he's going to be back every year. You're like, oh God, if I knew I'd be doing this in 3 years, I would have started when I was 15. You know? So, you know, but I remember the day of that shoot, I was so nervous. I went and had 3 Jack and Cokes at a bar before the fucking live shoot for the Brewer pilot because I was so
Wow.
nervous, man. Yeah. Oof.
Was that? Do you look back and go, I shouldn't have done that, or you should have done that?
Nah, I should have did that. And my favorite was my first hour special. Everything was set up to go. I was doing it in New York City, and I was practiced it, da da da. And I was out back with my wife, and she's like, "Do you need anything else?" I'm like, "Nah, I'd love to smoke a little weed." And we smoked a joint before I went out on stage. And as soon as I hit the stage, I was like, "Damn, I'm so glad I smoked that joint. It was perfect, baby."
True. I do know that feeling of just the right enough buzz that you're buzzed,
Yeah.
but not too much where you're like,
Yeah, and I
I've
was so prepared that there was no way, even in my sleep, I knew these jokes, you know? So it was great.
oh
So,
man. Well, thanks so much, dude. I
no, my
appreciate it.
pleasure, brother. Great to talk to you and to see you on the video and all that, man. You're looking good, man.
You too. And I listen. You're like, you and Pete are one of the only, or you and Sebastian are one of the only podcasts that I listen to. It's like I listen to you and Marin, and that's basically it. And I listen to Howard Stern, but that's not a podcast. But you
Thanks, man. I
guys just
appreciate
fucking,
it.
you have the only podcast really that's just fucking funny. It's a lot like Kevin James's sitcom where it's just funny. Like it's
Thanks,
not
bro.
like some serious. It's just funny. I just laugh watching it or
Ah,
listening to it. It's fucking great.
shit, dude. Thanks a lot, Joe. It means a lot, bro.
Yeah.
Coming from you, it means a lot.
All right, man. Take it easy. Tell your
All
wife
right,
I'm
I'll see you,
sorry.
brother.
All right, bye.
Later.
Later.